On October 8, 1918, at 6:10 a.m., a German machine gun battalion was dug into a hillside in the Argonne forest, France. The temperature was 7 degrees Celsius. A cold autumn mist hung in the valley below them. The men were part of the 2nd Landwehr Division, veterans who had held this line for months. They had survived Verdun. They had survived the Somme. Their position was nearly impregnable. 35 machine gun nests, arranged in overlapping fields of fire. Concrete bunkers, barbed wire. Trenches zigzagging through the trees. Below them, in the valley, they could see the American 82nd Division trying to advance. The Americans were new to this war. They attacked in straight lines. They bunched up. They were easy targets. The German gunners had killed hundreds of them in the past week alone. The commander of the position, a lieutenant named Vollmer, watched through his binoculars as another American patrol emerged from the mist. 17 men. They were moving through the trees, trying to flank the German position. Vollmer smiled. He had seen this before. The Americans would get close, his machine guns would open fire, and they would die. It was routine. He gave the order to his gunners. Wait until they're close. Make every bullet count. The patrol moved closer, 300 meters, 200 meters, 100 meters. And then something strange happened. The lead American, a tall man with a rifle, dropped to the ground. He didn't take cover. He didn't retreat. He just lay there, perfectly still. The German machine gunners waited for their lieutenant's order. But before Vollmer could speak, the tall American fired. A single shot. Crack. The machine gunner in nest number 3, 150 meters away, slumped over his weapon. The Germans were confused. It was a good shot, yes, but just one man. They had 34 more machine guns. Another gunner swung his weapon toward the American patrol. The tall American fired again. Crack. The second gunner fell, then a third. Crack. A fourth. Crack. The shots came so fast, so precisely, it didn't seem possible. This wasn't suppressing fire. This wasn't random shooting. Each shot was a kill. The German gunners began to panic. They fired wildly at the trees, at the mist, at shadows. But the tall American didn't move. He just kept firing. Crack! 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 Within minutes, 9 machine gunners were dead. And then the German commander made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He ordered a counterattack. 25 German soldiers fixed bayonets and charged down the hill, screaming, trying to overrun the American position. The tall American stood up. He pulled out his pistol, a Colt M1911, and he did something that no soldier in the German army had ever seen. He made turkey sounds. What those German soldiers didn't know, what Lieutenant Vollmer couldn't possibly understand, was that the tall American wasn't thinking like a soldier. He was thinking like a turkey hunter. And in the next 8 minutes, he would kill or capture more Germans than entire companies had managed in weeks of fighting. This is the story of Alvin York and the simple, forgotten turkey hunting trick that turned him into the greatest American hero of World War I. To understand how a single farmer could capture an entire battalion, you first have to understand the mountains. Alvin Cullum York was not born into a world of war. He was born in 1887 in a 2-room log cabin in Pall Mall, Tennessee, deep in the Cumberland Mountains. His family was dirt poor. They had no electricity, no running water, no education. His father was a subsistence farmer and a blacksmith. His mother raised 11 children, of which Alvin was the third. Life was hard, brutal, and simple. If you didn't hunt, you didn't eat. This was not sport. This was survival. The Cumberland Mountains are steep, densely forested. and unforgiving. The wildlife is sparse and wary. Deer, rabbits, squirrels, and turkeys. But turkeys are different. Turkeys are smart. A wild turkey has eyesight 5 times sharper than a human's. They can see ultraviolet light. They can detect the slightest movement from 100 yards away. They can hear a twig snap, a leaf rustle, a boot scrape on rock. They move in flocks. And the moment one bird senses danger, they all vanish into the brush. A turkey doesn't run in a straight line. It weaves through the forest, using terrain to break line of sight. It's one of the most difficult animals to hunt in North America. Professional hunters today, with modern rifles and camouflage, still struggle to bag a wild turkey. To hunt a turkey in the 1890s with a muzzle-loading rifle, with no scope, with black powder that produced a cloud of white smoke, was nearly impossible. But it was necessary, because a single turkey could feed a family for 3 days. To hunt a turkey, you can't just aim and shoot. You have to understand the flock. You have to understand behavior, hierarchy, and most importantly, you have to understand which bird to shoot first. This is where Alvin learned the trick that would save his life in France. Alvin's father gave him his first rifle when he was 8 years old. It was a muzzle-loading flintlock, older than the Civil War. No sights, just a crude iron barrel. And one rule from his father: don't waste powder. Every shot costs money. Every shot has to count. His father took him into the mountains before dawn. They would sit in the cold, waiting for turkeys to appear. And his father taught him the trick that would later save his life in France. When you see a flock of turkeys, don't shoot the first bird. Don't shoot the one in front, because the moment you fire, the rest will scatter. The lead turkey is the alpha. It's alert. It's watching. The moment it senses danger, it calls out, and the entire flock explodes in different directions. You'll get one bird, maybe, but the rest escape. You shoot the one in the back, the last bird in the line, the one that's not paying attention, the one that's following, not leading. When it falls, the others don't notice immediately. They keep moving. The alpha doesn't see what happened behind it. The flock doesn't panic. Then you reload, and you shoot the next one in the back, and the next. You work your way forward through the flock, taking them one by one, without spooking the leaders. It's called calling them up, or picking them off from the rear. It requires patience, timing, and an understanding of how prey thinks, how they behave, how they react. Alvin's father showed him this on his first hunt. They spotted a flock of 7 turkeys moving through a clearing at dawn. His father whispered, "Watch." He aimed at the last bird, fired. The turkey dropped. The others kept walking. He reloaded, aimed at the new last bird, fired. It dropped. The others still didn't notice. By the 4th shot, the lead turkeys finally realized something was wrong. They scattered. But Alvin's father had already taken 4 birds. 4 birds from one flock. That was food for 2 weeks. Alvin learned fast. By the time he was a teenager, he could hit a running turkey at 50 yards with iron sights. He could judge distance by instinct, by reading the terrain. He could estimate lead and windage in a fraction of a second. He could fire, reload, and fire again in under 10 seconds with a muzzle loader. He rarely missed. The people in Pall Mall called him the best shot in the county. He won shooting competitions at county fairs. But to Alvin, it wasn't sport. It was just how you survived. But Alvin didn't just hunt. He worked. He helped his father in the blacksmith shop. He learned to shoe horses, to fix plows, to work metal with hammer and anvil. He was strong, over 6 feet tall, with hands like iron from years of swinging a hammer. He could outwork any man in the valley. But he also had a dark side. Alvin was a drinker. By the time he was in his early 20s, he was known as a troublemaker. He gambled on cards and horse races. He fought in bars. He spent his meager earnings on whiskey and wild nights in the nearby towns. His mother, Mary, prayed for him every night, begging God to change her son's heart. She saw him destroying himself. She saw him wasting the talents God had given him. She would sit on the porch of their cabin and weep. Then, in 1914, his best friend, Everett Delk, was killed in a bar fight in Static, Kentucky. Alvin was there that night. He saw the fight break out. He saw the knife. He saw his friend bleed out on the floor. He held Everett as he died. It shook him to his core. He realized that could have been him. That should have been him. Shortly after, Alvin attended a revival meeting at the Church of Christ in Christian Union in Pall Mall. It was a small, whitewashed building with wooden pews. The preacher, Brother Rosier Pyle, was preaching on repentance, on sin, on redemption. Alvin sat in the back, his head bowed, and something broke inside him. He walked to the altar. He fell to his knees. He wept. He asked God to forgive him. He gave his life to Christ. He found religion. He became a devout Christian. He stopped drinking. He stopped fighting. He stopped gambling. He became a new man. He read the Bible every day. He attended church every Sunday. He taught Sunday school to children. His mother wept again, but this time with joy. The people in Pall Mall said it was a miracle. The wildest man in the valley had become the gentlest. And then, in April 1917, the United States entered World War I. President Wilson declared war on Germany. The country needed soldiers, millions of them. Alvin received his draft notice in June 1917. He was 29 years old. He didn't want to go. His church taught that killing was a sin. The Bible said, "Thou shalt not kill." Alvin was a conscientious objector. He wrote on his draft card, "Don't want to fight." But his appeal was denied. The local draft board told him he had no choice. On November 14, 1917, Alvin York boarded a train in Tennessee. He was heading to Camp Gordon, Georgia, for basic training. He was heading to a war he didn't believe in. He was a farmer who had never left his valley, about to face the largest war in human history. At Camp Gordon, Alvin was assigned to Company G, 328th Infantry Regiment, 82nd Division. The 82nd was a mixed division, made up of men from all over the country. Farm boys from Tennessee and Georgia, factory workers from New York and Philadelphia, city boys who had never held a rifle. Alvin stood out immediately. He was taller than most. He was stronger, and he could shoot. When they went to the rifle range for qualification, the instructors noticed immediately. While other recruits struggled to hit targets at 100 yards, Alvin was putting bullets through the bullseye at 300 yards with open sights. He could fire his bolt-action Springfield M1903 rifle faster than men with semi-automatics. He didn't jerk the trigger. He squeezed it. He controlled his breath. He was calm. He was precise. He was deadly. The range instructors had never seen anything like it. They asked him where he learned to shoot. Alvin said, "Hunting turkeys in Tennessee, sir." They didn't understand. But Alvin was still struggling with his conscience. He didn't want to kill. The Bible was clear. "Thou shalt not kill." How could he be a Christian and a soldier? How could he follow Christ and fire a rifle at another human being? His company commander, Captain Edward Danforth, saw the conflict in him. Danforth was a religious man himself, a graduate of divinity school before the war. He took Alvin aside one evening. They sat on the steps of a barracks. They talked for hours about duty, about the Bible, about whether it was possible to be both a Christian and a soldier. Danforth told him, "Alvin, the Bible also says to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. It says to submit to governing authorities. And it says that there is no greater love than to lay down your life for your friends. If you believe in freedom, if you believe in protecting the innocent, then sometimes you have to fight. Sometimes killing is necessary to stop greater evil. The Germans are killing innocent people. They've invaded nations. They've murdered women and children. If good men don't stop them, who will?" Alvin wrestled with this. He went on leave to Tennessee. He spent days in the mountains, alone, praying, reading his Bible, asking God for guidance. He climbed to the top of a ridge and sat on a rock, looking out over the valley. And finally, he came to a decision. He would fight. Not because he wanted to, not because he enjoyed it, but because he believed it was his duty. He believed God was calling him to protect the innocent. He returned to Camp Gordon a changed man, resolved, determined. In April 1918, the 82nd Division shipped out to France. They boarded transport ships in Hoboken, New Jersey. The crossing took 2 weeks. They landed in Liverpool, England, then crossed the Channel to Le Havre, France. When Alvin saw the trenches, the barbed wire, the shell craters, the bodies rotting in no man's land, he understood. This was not a war. This was hell. The 82nd was sent to the Meuse-Argonne sector in September 1918. It was the final push of the war. The Germans were dug in along a series of ridges in the Argonne forest. They had spent 4 years fortifying these positions: concrete bunkers, machine gun nests, artillery positions, barbed wire thicker than any hedgerow. The American Expeditionary Force, commanded by General John Pershing, was ordered to break through. The plan was simple: overwhelming force. Wave after wave of American soldiers would charge the German lines until they broke. The casualties were staggering. In the first week alone, the 82nd Division lost over 2,000 men. That was a quarter of their strength. The Germans had turned the forest into a killing field. Machine guns everywhere, artillery that could drop shells with pinpoint accuracy, snipers hidden in trees, gas attacks that left men choking and blind. It was a meat grinder. Every day, Alvin's company took casualties. Every day, he watched men he had trained with die. But Alvin survived. He kept his head down. He used the skills he had learned in the mountains. He moved quietly. He used terrain for cover. He didn't expose himself unnecessarily. And when he fired his rifle, he made every shot count. His officers noticed. They made him a corporal. Then, on October 7th, 1918, Alvin's company was ordered to take a German-held ridge called Hill 223. It was a suicide mission. But they had no choice. The offensive was stalling. They needed to break through. On the morning of October 8th, 1918, Alvin York and 16 other men from his platoon were sent on a flanking mission. Their objective was to locate and destroy a German machine gun nest that was pinning down the entire battalion. It was raining. The ground was muddy. Visibility was poor. They moved through the forest in single file, trying to stay quiet. Alvin was near the back. At 6:10 a.m., they stumbled into the rear of a massive German position. They weren't supposed to be there. It was a mistake, a navigation error. But suddenly, they were behind enemy lines, staring at 35 machine gun nests, hundreds of German soldiers, and a fortified command post. The American sergeant in charge, Bernard Early, made a quick decision: attack. They charged the command post, surprising the Germans. They captured the battalion commander, a Lieutenant Vollmer, and several officers. For a moment, it looked like a miracle. But then the German machine gunners on the hill realized what was happening. They turned their guns on the American patrol. The American soldiers dove for cover. The machine guns opened fire. The noise was deafening. Bullets tore through the trees. 9 of the 17 Americans were killed or wounded in the first 30 seconds. Sergeant Early was hit. The corporal was hit. Alvin York, now the ranking soldier, was lying in the mud, his rifle in his hands. He was in charge. He looked around. 8 men left, surrounded by hundreds of Germans, machine guns on 3 sides. This was it. This was the moment. And Alvin York stopped thinking like a soldier. He started thinking like a turkey hunter. He saw the German machine gunners the way he saw a flock of turkeys in the Cumberland mountains. They were in a line. The ones in front were the leaders, dangerous, alert. But the ones in back? They were the easy targets. Alvin lay perfectly still. He controlled his breath, just like Vasily Zaitsev in Stalingrad. He picked his first target. Not the closest gunner, not the most dangerous, the one in the back, the one the others wouldn't notice. He fired. Crack. The German gunner fell. The others kept firing, unaware. Alvin picked his next target, the next man in the back. Crack. He fell. Alvin worked his way forward through the line. 1 shot, 1 kill, just like turkeys. The German gunners began to panic. They couldn't see where the shots were coming from. They fired wildly. But Alvin was invisible. He was part of the forest. Then the German commander, Lieutenant Vollmer, made his fatal mistake. He ordered a bayonet charge. 25 German soldiers fixed bayonets and charged down the hill toward Alvin's position. They were screaming, running through the trees, trying to overrun him. This is where the turkey trick became something else. Alvin stood up. He pulled out his M1911 pistol, and he started shooting from the back of the line forward. The Germans charging at Alvin were running in a loose column, one behind the other. They expected him to shoot the man in front. That's what any soldier would do. But Alvin didn't. He shot the man in the back, the last man in the charge. The man fell. The others didn't notice. They kept running. Alvin shot the next man in the back of the line. He fell. Still, the others didn't realize. They kept charging. Alvin picked them off one by one, working his way forward through the column, just like turkeys. By the time the lead Germans realized what was happening, half their men were dead. The rest stopped, turned, and saw their comrades lying in the mud behind them. They saw Alvin York standing there, his pistol smoking. They saw a ghost. They saw death. The survivors threw down their weapons and raised their hands. But Alvin wasn't done. He turned his attention back to the machine gun nests. He picked up his rifle. He went back to work. He shot gunner after gunner, working his way through the nests. Each shot was precise. Each shot was a kill. He had learned deflection shooting, hunting running turkeys. He had learned timing hunting moving prey. He didn't aim where the target was. He aimed where it was going to be. The German machine gunners began to surrender. One by one, they threw down their weapons and climbed out of their bunkers, hands in the air. Lieutenant Vollmer, watching this impossible scene unfold, made a decision. He called out to Alvin in broken English, "If you stop shooting, I will make them surrender." Alvin kept his rifle aimed at him. "All of them?" Vollmer nodded. "All of them." Alvin agreed. Vollmer shouted orders in German. The machine gunners stopped firing. They climbed out of their positions. They formed a line, hands raised. Alvin looked around. He had 8 men left, and in front of him were 132 German soldiers surrendering. He had killed at least 25 Germans, maybe more. He had silenced 35 machine gun nests. And he had done it using a turkey hunting trick from the mountains of Tennessee. But now Alvin had a new problem. He was 5 kilometers behind enemy lines. He had 132 prisoners. He had 8 exhausted men. And he had to get back. The Germans were still shelling the forest. Their artillery didn't know their own men had surrendered. Alvin made the German officers march at the front of the column. He figured their own artillery wouldn't shell them if they saw German uniforms. He put his men at the rear, guarding the prisoners. And they started walking. They marched through the German lines. They marched past shocked German soldiers who didn't know whether to fight or surrender. Alvin's column kept growing. More Germans saw the massive surrender and threw down their weapons, joining the line. By the time Alvin York reached American lines, he had 132 prisoners. He walked them right up to his battalion headquarters. His commanding officer, Major Buxton, was in a meeting with other officers. They heard commotion outside. Buxton stepped out and saw a line of German soldiers stretching back into the forest. He saw Alvin York at the front. Buxton asked, "York, how many prisoners do you have?" Alvin shrugged. "I ain't had time to count them yet, sir." They counted. 132 prisoners. 4 officers. The entire German machine gun battalion had surrendered to 1 man. Major Buxton asked, "How many did you kill?" Alvin said, "I don't rightly know. I was trying not to kill them. But they kept shooting at me." When they investigated the battlefield later, they found at least 25 dead German soldiers, all of them shot by Alvin. Most of them shot through the head. The American command didn't believe it at first. They thought it was a mistake. They thought it was exaggerated. But they interviewed the prisoners. They interviewed the surviving American soldiers. They examined the battlefield. Every story matched. Alvin York, a farmer from Tennessee, had single-handedly destroyed a German battalion. General Pershing himself called it the greatest thing accomplished by any private soldier of all the armies of Europe. But for Alvin, the war wasn't over. His division stayed in France. They kept fighting, and Alvin kept killing. By November 11th, 1918, when the armistice was signed, Alvin had become a reluctant legend. He was promoted to sergeant. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross. Then it was upgraded to the Medal of Honor. The French government gave him the Croix de Guerre. The Italians gave him their highest honor. But Alvin didn't want fame. He wanted to go home. When the 82nd Division returned to America in May 1919, they landed in New York City. Alvin York was pulled aside. He was told there would be a parade, a reception, reporters. Alvin said he didn't want any of that, but it didn't matter. The moment he stepped off the ship, the press swarmed him. They called him Sergeant York. They called him the greatest hero of the war. They wrote front-page stories. The New York Stock Exchange stopped trading when he walked past. He was given a ticker-tape parade down Broadway. He was paraded through the streets like a Roman general. Alvin hated every second of it. He stood on the back of a car, waving awkwardly, wishing he was back in the mountains. He was offered movie deals, vaudeville shows, endorsements. Companies wanted to pay him hundreds of thousands of dollars to use his name. Alvin turned them all down. He said, "I ain't proud of killing those Germans. I done my duty. That's all." He was asked by a journalist, "How did you do it? How did you capture so many men?" Alvin's answer was pure farmer's logic. He said, "It's the same way you hunt turkeys. You shoot the ones in the back first, so the others don't notice. I just did what I learned as a boy." The reporter didn't understand. but the turkey hunters in Tennessee did. Alvin went home to Pall Mall. He married his sweetheart, Gracie Williams, the woman he had been writing letters to throughout the war. The state of Tennessee gave him a farm, 385 acres in the mountains. The people of Tennessee raised money to build him a house. Alvin didn't ask for any of it. He just wanted to live quietly. He wanted to farm. He wanted to raise a family. And he did. Alvin and Gracie had 8 children. But Alvin didn't forget where he came from. He saw the poverty in his community. He saw children who couldn't read, who had no opportunities. So he started a school, the Alvin C. York Agricultural Institute. He raised money. He built buildings. He brought in teachers. He wanted to give mountain children the education he never had. It's still operating today. For 20 years, Alvin lived quietly. He farmed. He taught Sunday school. He hunted in the mountains. But in 1941, when World War II began, Hollywood came calling again. A producer named Jesse Lasky wanted to make a movie about Alvin's story. For years, Alvin had refused. But now, with another war, Alvin saw an opportunity. If he let them make the movie, he could use the money to expand his school. He agreed, with one condition. The movie had to be accurate. It had to show that he was a man of faith. It had to show that he didn't want to kill. In 1941, Sergeant York was released. It starred Gary Cooper, who won the Academy Award for Best Actor. The film was a massive success. It became one of the highest-grossing films of the 1940s. It inspired millions of young men to enlist. Alvin York, the reluctant hero, had become a symbol of American courage. But Alvin himself never watched the full film. He said it made him uncomfortable to see his life on screen. This is the ripple effect. This is the piano wire that changed history. Alvin York's actions on October 8, 1918, didn't just capture 132 Germans. They broke the German defensive line in the Argonne forest. His action allowed the American advance to continue. Within weeks, the Germans were in retreat. The war ended on November 11, 1918, just 33 days after Alvin's fight. Historians argue that actions like York's, small but decisive, helped bring about the end of the war. But the real ripple was psychological. Before Alvin York, the American soldier was seen as inexperienced, untested. The Europeans doubted them. But York proved that Americans could fight, that they were tough, that they were resourceful, and most importantly, that they brought something the European armies didn't have. They brought frontier skills. They brought hunting instincts. They brought the logic of the wilderness. Alvin York didn't fight like a trained soldier. He fought like a turkey hunter, and that made all the difference. The German soldiers surrendered not because they were outgunned. They surrendered because they were outthought. They were facing a man who understood prey behavior better than they understood military tactics. This was the same logic that Simo Häyhä used in Finland, the same logic that Vasily Zaitsev used in Stalingrad, the same logic that Joe Foss used in the Pacific. It was the logic of the hunter, the predator, the man who understands patience, timing, and the fatal mistake of showing fear. And just like those men, Alvin York paid a price. He didn't take a bullet. He didn't lose his eyes. But he lost his peace. For the rest of his life, Alvin was haunted by what he had done. He had nightmares. He would wake up in the night sweating, seeing the faces of the Germans he had killed. He prayed for them. He prayed for forgiveness. He told his children, "Killing is a sin. I did it because I had to, but it don't make it right." In his later years, Alvin suffered a stroke. He lost his ability to speak clearly. He was bedridden. The man who had once been the strongest in his valley was now frail. In 1964, Alvin York died at the age of 76. He was buried in the Wolf River Cemetery in Pall Mall, Tennessee. Thousands attended his funeral. Soldiers, veterans, farmers, presidents sent condolences. But the most moving moment was when 8 of his former students from the York Institute carried his coffin. The boys he had taught, the boys he had given a future. The legacy of Alvin York is not just his Medal of Honor. It's not just the movie. It's the lesson. It's the understanding that wars are not won by doctrine alone. They're won by individuals who see the flaw in the system. James McKenna, the mechanic, saw a flaw in the P-38's control cables. He saw 3/8 of an inch of slack that meant death, and he fixed it with a piece of piano wire. Simo Haiha, the farmer, saw a flaw in the sniper doctrine. He saw that a scope glinted in the snow, and he fixed it by using iron sights and the cold itself. Joe Foss, the farm boy, saw a flaw in the dogfighting doctrine. He saw that you couldn't outturn a zero, but you could outthink it with deflection shooting. Vasily Zaitsev, the shepherd, saw a flaw in modern warfare. He saw that breath control and stillness could defeat technology. And Alvin York, the turkey hunter, saw a flaw in the way men fought. He saw that machine gunners, like turkeys, could be picked off from the back without the others noticing. These are the forgotten pages, the stories of men who didn't follow the manual, who trusted their instincts, who brought the wilderness into the war. Alvin York died in 1964, but the lesson he taught lives on. In every military in the world, soldiers are taught the same thing. Adapt, improvise. Think like a hunter, not just a soldier. They don't always say his name, but they're teaching Alvin York's trick. The trick of the turkey hunter from Tennessee who turned the Argonne forest into a hunting ground. If you found this story as compelling as we did, please take a moment to like this video. It helps us share more forgotten stories from the world wars. Subscribe to stay connected with these untold histories. Each one matters. Each one deserves to be remembered. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Our community spans from Texas to Tasmania. From veterans to history enthusiasts, you're part of something special here. Thank you for watching, and thank you for keeping these stories alive.